I sometimes ask women, I show this and just ask. I mean, at Mukta, we also deal with men who are survivors of domestic violence, dating violence. So we just show this picture and ask them to interpret it. Many times, they'll say, yeah, I am this person. You know, sometimes I've had women say, my child is this. I am the chair who is holding the child's, the freedom. So, but this is actually, there is this theorist by name Seligman. It's his concept. This is theory of learned helplessness, deeply internalized, that you are helpless. You've learned to be helpless. You learn to be helpless. So are you this horse, very, very strong, but then socially conditioned to believe that you cannot escape? And then we'll ask, what is it that's holding you like this chair? Then we'll make a list. Then we are like, okay, this is what you think is holding. Many times I said, my child is holding me back in this marriage. And now I used one phrase, right? Exploration of what? Logical, loudly, logical consequences. What is this exploration of logical consequence? Imagine, here is a lady who's telling, I am in this abusive marriage because of my child. Now, exploration of logical consequences, has your child told you that, Mummy, stay back in this marriage? No, but then how are you assuming it? Isn't it? Then we'll make, the mother speak to the child. So many times children are like, Mom, why are you in this? No. So then you see what they have learned is holding them back is truly not the case. See, this I call, I'll just write it on the board. I love this exercise, which is called, um, this is something that in 2015 I just, termed a coin, no, coined the term, and the activity is called exercise of enumeration. Sounds too fancy? Nothing. In fact, what it means is exercise of enumeration simply means whenever somebody is telling, everything is holding me back. What's that everything? Can we enumerate it? Enumerate it as 1, 2, 3 lists. Trust me, lists in the life of a survivor, I mean, its meaning is immense. See, psychologically, when everything seems uncontrollable and the list is making it concrete, at least we can take one at a time and address it. Anytime anybody says, all the problems, all, you say, let's list it down. The moment you put it on paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see it, that means it's all out from your brain. This is called brain dump. Don't we all feel relieved in the morning when we use the washroom? Similarly, this is the brain dump. And brain dump not in a abstract manner. We are even giving it a number. We even like what we have dumped. That's the truth. So exercise of enumeration is make a list. All that's holding you back, like this chair, can we now explore the logical consequences one by one by one by one? We've trained many, my experience is not in Karnataka, but we've trained several lawyers in Tamil Nadu. When somebody comes, they have a lot of problems. You just make lists of it. And lists kind of give a illusion of, yeah, dealing with things in a structured manner. It's an illusion to begin with, but the more we deal with it one by one, somehow things seem manageable. Especially an excellent exercise to deal with anxiety. Say, I want you to know, say, I'll ask you this, maybe let's brainstorm. Is fear easy to deal with or anxiety? If so, if there is an opinion, what's the difference between fear and anxiety?
Stimulus. So fear has a clear stimulus, but anxiety is ever present. So there will be nothing in my surrounding, but I will just be sweating like something's wrong.
Did you all hear your name?
Akanksha.
Like Akanksha said, when we are afraid, we know what we are afraid of. Yeah. But anxiety is diffused fear. Diffused fear means what? I know I'm afraid, but I don't know what I'm afraid. Maybe I've not given it a thought. And therefore, that anxiety becomes pervasive and persistent. Pervasive means what? It seems to cover all areas of my life. Persistent is time. So, therefore, whenever you're emotionally supporting anyone, when I say this line, don't mistake me. Whenever you're emotionally supporting, it's okay that we make the person get scared of something. But anxious, right? There is no way of supporting. And there, what comes in handy is the exercise of enumeration. The moment you say, okay, you don't know what you're afraid of, you're feeling anxious, can we just put down everything that you're afraid of, however trivial you feel? Then we'll make a list. And then we need to start dealing with it one by one by one by one. Say, I don't know whether I'm communicating the importance of enumeration, especially working with a survivor of violence. Numbers matter. ಹೇಳಿ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇದೆ, it overwhelms people. It's still better to say I have 100 problems and I've put it on paper, as opposed to 5 problems that I've spoken without a count. In that 100, one by one by one, I always tell my clients, do you have this to-do list habit of striking things off? Instead of that, let's say we have a list. I want to speak to my child and all that. Instead of striking, you put V, victory. The joy that many people feel when they're writing V next to those small goals, it builds an intrinsic motivation. Correct. That tick, we are making it V. It's like victory. You're victorious. And that sense of control matters. Are you all okay? So this I talked about as a way to enumerate what's holding them back. See, now what I'm going to talk to you all is specific mental illnesses. Yeah. And for these four, it might be a 5 of you, it might be a repetition, because this is going to be symptoms of PTSD. What is PTSD? Post traumatic stress disorder. These are symptoms that have persisted even after 6 months after the instance. Imagine here is a lady who's burnt herself. It's trauma. It could be potentially traumatic. Yeah. Now, these are the symptoms of PTSD. Now, I'm going to talk about the mental health impact in a more deeper, the sense. Now, I'm just thinking, should we go one by one or shall I collectively summarize, and shall I do that? Yeah? Okay. Because this is for actual diagnosis. Yeah? Now, for us to call what this person is going through as PTSD, which is the most common mental illness among survivors of domestic violence or any form of violence. First, there are going to be intrusive memories. Intrusive memories. What does it mean? See, recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories. Imagine they're, getting the child ready for the school, but the memory keeps coming back. It's like a flashback, reliving the traumatic event as if it's happening now. So it's like they say, no, death is once, but then dying with every time a memory comes. Can you imagine what happens to the body? Yeah, and somebody might say it's just a slap, but what if the person is having flashbacks? A flashback is equivalent to the incident. Yeah, then upsetting dreams and nightmares. Imagine whatever be the traumatic event, if there are nightmares, that means sleep is disturbed. And then severe emotional distress or physical reaction to something that reminds them of traumatic event. I'll give this example. This lady approached us for counseling. She's someone who's experienced domestic violence in the past, and according to her, it has stopped now, and she willingly has continued to live with, her husband. But then she saw this movie Kurukshetra, and I'm imagining in her description there is this Panchali scene, no? And the way they talk about whatever be the mythology, but then She's talked in a very derogatory manner. It's like, 5 husbands and all that. Now, that triggered her memories. Earlier, the instance was that you are being infidel. That was the husband's accusation. And for her, watching that scene where I think it's Duryodhana who speaks to Panchali in a very derogatory manner, now that scene had re traumatized her. And for about a week's time, the dread, it's as if the abuse is happening. That the family did not understand. It's like, abuse stop agide, ee game nindo. But then for her, it was intrusive memory. Suddenly, when she saw those dialogues, the memories just resurfaced, and she had all the physical reactions that she used to have when she was abused. And I mean, what I saw in her was, they say, I've not seen it in a really long time, that the emotions and skin are very much, in sync. She had got rashes. She had got rashes for no psychosomatic symptoms. And she's like, yeah, I'm bleeding. And for the husband, it's like, once again, counseling goes, ಹಳೆದೆಲ್ಲ ತೆಗಿತೀಯ. He would tell that. ಹಳೆದೆಲ್ಲ ತೆಗಿತಾಳೆ ಅಂತ ಭಯ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್. ಹಳೆದೆಲ್ಲ ತೆಗಿತ್. Meaning she would dig up the past. But then what I'm trying to say here is, from the mental health point of view, it's called post-traumatic because it can happen months later, years later. So, as someone wanting to support survivors of domestic violence, even if it is 10 years later, it's quite possible, because that's the nature of PTSD. Are you all okay with this? Intrusive memories are real. The next set of symptoms is what we call, avoidance. Trying to avoid thinking or talking about the traumatic event, avoiding places, activities, or people that remind you. And I think those of us who are working in this field, this we must remember, simply because everyone, this is important. Case workers, social workers, imagine here is a survivor of domestic violence having PTSD, and her symptom is avoidance. And us asking her to recollect what has happened could re traumatize. If somebody says, Ivat nang matadak ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, I don't want to talk. I know they have come all the way. And yet it's always best we give that person that space. Be it in a hospital setting, and very recently I was engaged in some training, Hassan police, and there the police, the constables, and the rest of them are all talking about how ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳ್ದಿರ ಕಳ್ಸಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. Now you see what's happening? Yes, she came to the police station. She does not know PTSD, right? She does not know avoidance as a symptom. But if the system is not aware of trauma, we might force the person to talk about their experience of trauma, and that can re traumatize. And that could be just as damaging as the very incident itself. So sometimes you can see the hesitation. ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್, ಹೇಳಬೇಕು, ನಾವು ಬರ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ we are re-traumatizing. See, those are the clues. Can you give me examples of how they could avoid the topic? Because they know it disturbs them. Can you give those lines? ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾ? What else can be those lines?
They give unnecessary details where they'll set the scene for too long or something.
Did you all hear? Like, say for example, this is once again, a contact that Satya had given for my PhD, the work. Had gone to Anekal for that interview. Thanks for sharing that, because it brought back memories. I am not exaggerating, I asked her, she said, Illa, I will talk. 3 times she had cancelled, but the 4th time she was willing. Therefore, I went. I just asked broadly, tell me about the day, that you burnt yourself. She gave me an entire recipe of palav. An entire recipe of palav. She gave me vegetable palav. And then she said, adadmele agoytu bidi. And then see, when you're a therapist, it's one. When you're a researcher, the agenda. Fine, I put on the cap of a trauma-informed therapist, and I was okay to let go. But did you see what she just did? She thought she was comfortable talking. See, what had happened was she was cooking and then the fight took place. And because she was closer to the stove, she burnt herself. I wanted to understand the motives of that, what happened. But then what she gave me was an entire recipe of vegetable palav because she was avoiding the traumatic details according to her. And then I referred her to another therapist to talk because it's a classic sign of PTSD. That's very much there. Then I could not use that interview. So it's all. So avoidance is an indication of PTSD, quite severe. Are you all okay with this? Yeah? The next set of, look at this. Negative changes in thinking and mood, negative thoughts about yourself, other people, the world, hopelessness feelings, memory problems. Now, this is so important. When you're working with survivors of abuse, who we can, when I say assume, statistically informed assumption, not baseless. You can assume they would be traumatized. You need to avoid this line of tell me exactly what happened. Correctageli ಹೆಂಗ್ ಶುರು ಆಯಿತು. Now the idea is, everyone please listen to, the idea is trauma means the memories are not linear. Memories are not linear. If they can tell, Nodi madam, ing shuru aitu, ingaitu, know that they're not traumatized. When we are dealing with survivors of trauma, their memories are a puzzle to themselves. They don't know whether this person hit her in the third year of marriage first or the first day of the marriage. Memories are jumbled. Yeah? And what happens is, in an attempt to reprocess their memory, they may tell different things at different points. Now, sometimes what is assumed is they are lying. Are they lying? They are not lying. Instead, they are just trying to make sense of their memory, which is all a jigsaw puzzle now. Imagine a child abused. The memory is not going to be linear. And to ask, tell the date when it happens, the child, na? Date, time, what did the person say? Now the child says, Wednesday the person said this, today. And tomorrow the child may feel like, hey, idu avatte helidalla Thursday. Now somebody is thinking that's lie. It's not lie. That's what trauma manifestation is. Memory issues in general, say for example, mental health perspective, when women are undergoing menopause, quite possible memories are a blur. See, imagine we have an examination system where a child reads and can't reproduce the same thing. We know memory issues are real. And yet in the court of law, where there is violence, we act as if our memories are 100% reliable. What is this idea of linearity? Na? It's like one thing after one thing after one thing. This is not a domestic violence survivor, a dating violence, the survivor. She told me, my narration style is Quentin Tarantino like. I think there is a director, no? The last scene comes first, and the guy is like Upendra, ma'am. Kannadadallu Upendra. I've not watched. So what I'm trying to say here is, she had a sense of what had happened to her memory. And she had earlier been, to an NGO to lodge a complaint where they had said, you're confusing. It's not linear. How do we take it forward? And she got severely disturbed. So therefore, what I'm trying to say here is, look, the memory problems are real. That's what trauma is. In a summary manner, if I have to define what is, the trauma, earlier I said a sense of overwhelming, the pressure. But the other way to look at it is jigsaw memory. It's all a jigsaw puzzle. If in therapy, if you can make the memory linear, that's healing. That's healing. So, yeah, yes, ma'am.
So sometimes with like memory problems, they won't be taken seriously. So I've noticed a lot of people, because we have a very open discussion in college for something. If there is a traumatic issue, they like, myself included, I've made like a whole story that I'll keep using everywhere I'm asked about it. So even then, it's like I'm not being taken seriously because I know, okay, fine, here I will like cue laughter, like that. Like even if you attach a story to it and if you've drafted it in like a linear manner, even then like it doesn't hold true a lot of times.
Say for example, see this is, I think Kajol had attended our trauma-informed approach. See, all of trauma-informed care, we can have like a 12-hour workshop and so on. I'm just trying to summarize. Imagine, you ask a woman, let's say, this is to say how memory, sometimes it's not to be taken, you know, when we are crying, let's say, if I'm crying, have I seen myself from outside? Did you all get my question? When I'm crying, if I'm crying, have I seen myself from outside? No. But then when I ask, can you imagine yourself cry? We all have a memory, no? That means what? We did something in the brain. See, this is only to say, see, now the other flip side to this discussion is then whatever a women survivor is telling, it's like, hey, this is not true. I don't want that to be the outcome of talking about memories. Only the chronology gets zigzag. He hit me, then nobody should say, no, he's not hit you, you're imagining. No, it's only the matter of chronology gets jigsawed. You're okay? Because otherwise, anybody in the court of law can twist the matter like this. Insanity plea is this, no? One way insanity plea, the other way is to tell that you are insane and therefore everything you're telling is a lie. No. The only thing I want you to remember is the chronology. Tell me exactly what happened. Tell me exactly when it started. That we need to avoid because it's a lot of pressure for survivors of trauma. The rest of it, you see, feeling detached, lack of interest in activities, all of this. Are you all okay? Now, the last set of symptoms for PTSD is this: changes in physical and emotional reactions. Being easily startled. In Kannada, what do we call it? Jug bilod. Somebody might be saying, and jug bidde. Jug bidde is like suddenly somebody walks in and, that startled response. Why am I emphasizing on this? Because it's easily recognizable. Yeah? Then always being on guard for danger, self-destructive behavior, trouble sleeping, concentrating, irritability, overwhelming guilt or shame. Now, all of this in various combination when it's occurring, what should we know? That the person is suffering from PTSD. And therefore, by default requires therapy. By default requires therapy. It's very much essential. Now, these are the long-term consequences as well as short-term consequences of trauma. These are the 4 ways we can categorize the aftermath of trauma: flight, fight, freeze, and fawn. Flight. Somebody might become so workaholic, anxious, difficulty sitting still, or they may become perfectionist. See, sometimes, I'm just telling this. Sometimes in the workshops that we've conducted here, there have been certain survivors who talk, and there is absolutely no control. They're coping, that's fine, but they're being traumatized because after there is clearly a pre-trauma period where they weren't talking so much, and after. So flight means something is still bothering them, but they want to run away from addressing it or feeling it. So for all you know, they talk a lot. They're networking a lot more than what's helpful to them. No, flight response. What is flight? They want to run away from what they're feeling. And that running away is happening maybe by doing a lot of work or paying attention to gymming, or binge eating. What else could it be? Huh? Drinking, absolutely. Flight, one of the most common. The response is consumption of alcohol. Or sometimes it could also be promiscuity. Sexually, they might become very promiscuous just as a way to escape from their deep rooted pain of being violated. You're okay? Because, see, I mean, I've had cases where a therapist, not in the social work setting, somebody was sexually abused, and now they're revealing that they're also sexually promiscuous. The therapists have judged them. Abuse ಆಯಿತು ಅಂತ ವಿಕ್ಟಿಮ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ now you are telling you are being very sexually promiscuous. That judgment is an indication that you've not understood the consequences of trauma. That's their unhelpful method of running away from that memory. You're okay with this? Did you all understand flight response? Yeah? Then we have fight. What is this fight? They are victims maybe of domestic violence. They are traumatized, but they're angry. They're angry at anyone, including the social worker who wants to help them. Yeah? Controlling, the bully, they themselves have what is known as explosive behavior. Explosive behavior is like they're cool as a cucumber, but like a spring. Sometimes they can get so aggressive. I want you to make note of this word, because you tell me WHO or any big organization, when they are observing depression prevention week, what's the picture that they put? Maybe a lady on that window pane, there are tears and there is raindrops. Isn't that the stereotype? Sadness. You're depressed means you should be sad. But there is also what is known as hostile depression. Hostile depression is you're angry, you're fuming, you pick up fights, but you're depressed. Now, the world over, what's happened is if you're depressed, that means you don't have energy to yell. No. Hostile depression is you rake up energy to get angry. See, sometimes even youngsters we've seen, fathers and mothers tell her, she can't be depressed, ma'am. She's lying. You know how she yells at us? This is a myth that depression is crying and weeping, and it's unfortunate. There is hostile depression. And they usually have this fight response to trauma, because they're not fighting with you. They're feeling, if I don't fight, then I might want to die. Have you seen the day we fight, we have the urge to live? Yes or no? The day we have fought, yes, it's annoying, but there is still urge to live. If not love, urge to live another day to prove that person wrong. Yes or no? That's fine. I personally, when I say personally, I believe when people have fight response to trauma, you can channelize that anger in a desirable manner. It's easier to work with as opposed to the other. Are you all okay with this? Then we have freeze response. When people have freeze response, look what's happening. They have difficulty making decisions, stuck, isolated, numb. They'll fix an appointment with you for counseling, they don't turn up. Freeze response. Namge en ansutte, we've given an appointment and this is the attitude you have. We want to help you. Freezes, they don't have an energy to move forward, even when they know moving forward helps them in that direction. These are all various responses to trauma. The last one, fawn. Sometimes people who are traumatized will become people pleasers. No boundaries. They want to be codependent, lack of identity. Why? Because that's their way of letting the world know, please don't trouble me. I've been troubled enough. Are you all okay with this? So whenever we are seeing somebody coming to us with any set of concerns, let us not forget that it could be a trauma response. Can, ma'am. See? They can even develop narcissistic. And it's their way to cope. See, don't get me wrong. This is not to pitch, or to make it seem like women Cannot. See, sometimes I've met mother-in-laws telling, ಎಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ಕಾದಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾ? See that line? They've been victims themselves. And their way of processing their trauma is waiting and waiting and then wanting to regain power, unfortunately, by victimizing another woman. While throughout not acknowledging that, at least if this lady had challenged the system, the most basic system is our own family, that intergenerational trauma could have been avoided, no? But you see, quite possible. See, I think 2 3 months back, one other, the social worker, very well reputed. When I was talking about the mental health perspective, she was like, Ashwini, I understand it, but the moment we look at perpetrators' mental health, human rights, how do we? True. See, mental health will look at intergeneration. With that logic, you can't punish anyone. Imagine somebody who's burning, antisocial personality disorder. It's a mental illness. Somewhere we need to, yeah, draw. So therefore, see, I understand historically, the women rights movement earlier didn't think about mental health. That's the right path. Otherwise, we would have stayed stuck there only. Because the moment you look at perpetrators' mental health, justice and everything becomes a very complicated manner. Historically, it's only now in India we are beginning to talk. I feel all that happens for the good. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come this far also. Imagine every child sexual offender, pedophilia is a mental illness. But that does not mean everybody is a pedophile who is. But then they can claim, no? So, themselves. See, when you say that, you see, ma'am, what's happening? Yeah, that's the tricky part of mental health and violence. But we need to dialogue. We need to dialogue. See, depression and anxiety, I'm not saying easier to understand, but it's pretty straightforward. Trauma, it's more broad and therefore, yeah. Are you all okay? When a person is traumatized, well, within that gambit, there could be depression symptoms, anxiety, substance abuse, and all of that. Now let's look at the psyche of the abuser. The research is so vast. Yeah, I've just picked up that which is practically usable. Hmm? If you want, you please read up on Holsworth, Munro, and Stewart research. And this is something that stood the test of time. 94 original research, but then it's something that seems to be valid, for at least now, 3 decades now? Almost. What's this? Typologies of male batterers. Okay, abusers. I don't like the word batterer. Abusers. Batter, no? Okay, the first one, family only batterers. Remember, Sudeshna ma'am was asking a very fundamental question. If somebody has personality disorder, they cannot pick and choose. Like, so those of you who watched Big Bang Theory, Sheldon picking and choosing the ones he could irritate? Or is it pervasive? He generally does. That's the result of the other. But who are these family only batterers? They are so gentle, calm, emotionally regulated, maybe in their workplace, but then somehow couldn't bring in the same emotional regulation with the wife or with the children. That means what? There is a choice. There is a choice. And that has to be motivated by something that's giving them the power to be abusive. Are you all okay with this? I'll give one example. This, I think, middle-aged man suddenly started to, when I say suddenly, he had a plan, but it felt like he suddenly started to be physically abusive towards the mother, the wife. They've been married for like 15, 20 years. They had no issues suddenly. And the wife did what she had to do, had given a complaint, and she also got this person to, therapy. After exploring, what we realized is, he tells, ಏನು ಕಾರಣ ಇಲ್ಲ ವೈಫ್ ನೋಡಿಯೋಕ್ಕೆ. ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ no reason. Then what's the reason? You've been hitting her quite consistent. Madam, hane barha, madam. Destiny. Yenappa destiny. How else can I control my son? Son is a teenager. He is turning out to be quite, also he's an adolescent, has a mind of his own. The father doesn't know any other way to control the son, teach the son certain things. So the only way that he thought was easier is to control the wife. Just, I remember our therapist, it was something that I supervised. Our therapist asking, Magange yaak hodiyalla, avun tirgs hoditane. He'll hit me back. So the easier target is, you see? So look at the reasons for domestic violence. To control the son is controlling the wife, a family only batterer. And others to boast that, hey, I hit my wife in maybe the drinking spree. Some of them are hitting the wife, family only batterers. Law, legal awareness sometimes will stop them. Are you all okay with this? But sometimes, family only batterers can improve with couple counseling. If it is a family only batterer, they're likely, I'm not telling 100%, they're likely to improve in, make note of this word, conjoined couple counseling. Conjoined couple counseling means what? They together can come and seek therapy. There is no identifiable mental illness for family only batterers. Are you all okay? Now, look at the second one, dysphoric borderline batterer. The moment dis comes, what do we know in mental health? I've already told you. There is a dysfunction, there is a mental illness. So when it is dysphoric borderline batterer, there is some mental illness that the abuser is suffering from. It could be dependent personality disorder. Do you remember? That person would say, I want to see you before I go, otherwise my day is ruined. Dependent personality disorder. Or maybe there is substance dependence, alcoholism. Now, for them, please listen to this. When it's dysphoric borderline batterer, that means there is a mental illness. Couples therapy won't work. Instead, we need to send this person for individual counseling first, make recovery, and if need be, later they can come to conjoined couples therapy. Are you all okay with this? Yeah? Now, when it comes to antisocial batterers, they are suffering from antisocial personality disorder. These are times that psychologists would say, we give up, because history has proven that. Antisocial personality disorders are difficult. These are psychopaths. They may manipulate the therapist. There are instances the therapists have vanished. These are culprits. So for them, if it is antisocial batterers, the first step has to be legal intervention. If we send for couples therapy, say, I'll tell you, twice I've had instances where somebody that retrospectively I understood is an antisocial batterer trying to violate my bodily boundaries. Once it happened at, the Montfort, when, I was the therapist, the person intentionally. And of course, I said, now I'm not your therapist. I'm somebody who's there to only protect my rights. I'm going to take it, to legally. He begged and pleaded and all that happened. And then, legally another institution took care of it. But you see what's happening? These are antisocial batterers. They're nosy. They want to know where you stay, so that they have their own ways of reasoning how they can manipulate you. So I would say, when we are looking at antisocial batterers, counseling is a waste of time.
Yeah, but the thing is, many of personality disorders, it's actually will not start in the first trigger point. So when the trauma start or the violence start, so there will always not be the personality which actually influence. So we do have to actually differentiate between the what is actually happened and what has been influencing and what has been happening right the current situation and all, no? So everything matters here. So to take the final decision, we actually understand the person along with the survival and the perpetrator. So again, it matters. So when you rightly pointed out, when we initially look the violent survivals situations, when we understand their problem, when we allow them to ventilate exactly, and also when we allow them to give the rating of their own complaints. So 1, 2, 3, what complaint they want to exactly address. So it's actually based on them, the what they want to address. So then we will go back to understand the family also. Family in the sense the husband. So here the family system also comes. So when we understand the husband as a perpetrator, then we know the what problem he also has. Sometimes what happened, childhood experience also trigger. If he has undergone when mother went to the violence during his childhood, it also influenced him when he is an adult. So all these things require to understand, then only we will take the decision. Until that, it is again in the assessment phase only.
See, all of this, see, now just listening to you, imagine somebody with antisocial personality disorder had a mother who was very, very violent. I'll give you this example. Before, the COVID, Bosco Mane, no? Yeah, that was also the first place I had interned. Now, there was a nun there. She was talking about a child 11-year-old child. 11-year-old child has taken a boulder and then put it on the head of a 3-year-old child after raping her. Can you believe? 11-year-old raped a 3-year-old, killed her. Now she was telling, and this child is in observation home, or I don't know, I think so. Yeah, in Madivada. Yeah, observation home. Yeah, observation home. And this sister was telling about the history where the child, it seems, has told that the mother had physically, was violent towards him. And in that anger, he came out. And then the mother, she has spoken, is what I have not met the child, or I don't know the case. The sister is telling, when she met the mother, you know what the mother has said? That she was beaten up brutally by the husband, who is an alcoholic. And look at the chain of violence. So it's like, say, for example, DSM. Ma'am, you correct me. My training was in DSM 40 or DSM 5, maybe 5 now. No, see, DSM 4, which is a diagnostic manual, would clearly say this is the diagnosis, and it is not talking about the causal factor. At least in that particular book. At least imagine, we are calling it antisocial personality, and that's what it is. But what if this individual with antisocial personality was brought up in an anti-human environment? Then what is antisocial? See, all of this. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. I'll send across an article to all of you. It says DSM is the greatest work of fiction ever. See, what do we? That's true. There is, see, with that, each one story is being written by the environment. So at least, the mental health, the domain, the way, it's like the first wave, second wave, third wave. I believe now it's the third wave. The third wave is the ecological perspective. That's where anything, yes, there is pathology, no doubt about it, but everything said and done, we need to understand it from the larger ecological perspective. Imagine the mother is being aggressive. How could you hit the child? But then she is now being hit by someone. So ecology. So instead of labeling her with a disorder or any label, can we at least understand the ecology which has contributed? But if we go on that, where do we begin the change? Like ma'am said, where do we begin? Yeah.
I once, I once fostered a child. We fostered many kids in our home. I once fostered a child who was 5 years old, and the agency, also called orphanages, gave him to me because they couldn't deal with him. And suddenly, I have three daughters, but suddenly I found that I also have three sons. I suddenly found that the girls would yell and say that he was attempting. Now, to use a stupid word, he was attempting to molest them. He would touch them on the breast. He would try and touch their private parts. He would go to my domestic help and do likewise because they were young women. Then another thing he attempted to do all of the time was he noticed that anything that I liked, he would break. And one day he knows that I'm very particular about who jumps on my bed. I didn't like children jumping on my bed. So he went on my pillow, he pulled the counterpane down, and he did his big job on my pillow. And then it turns out that he was actually, he was relinquished, he was given away. He was actually came from a family where the father continually abused the mother. And he was a witness to that. And not only that, the woman couldn't do anything untoward. He would break something that she loved. He would burn her sard. And they both were engineers, mind you, the parents. They were not, they were educated. And he would burn her saris or he'd throw her food out. And this child at 5 years old was mimicking all that. Of course, the end of the story is good.
Okay. Did you all hear? Think about it. Math, not even 2000 days old on earth, already absorbed the ways of living. And maybe at this point, keeping in mind ma'am's example and also the time factor, I'll go to see the mental health of witnesses of violence. Like ma'am said, the boy was a witness of, the violence. Mostly children are witnesses. They are likely to develop two set of problems: internalizing and externalizing kind of problems. Now, did you all hear what ma'am said? Here is a child who try and break things that she liked. Do exactly the opposite. Does it look like an internalizing one or an externalizing? Externalizing. So children who are witnesses of violence, why are they developing these problems? And the happy news is maybe this is going to be the last but one topic. You're okay? Yeah? Okay. Some of you hunger also. Donna, 5 minutes? 5 minutes, are you all okay? Yeah? Sure. Now look at this. See, why are they developing these as a defense? No? See, imagine that particular sister, when she said that 11 or 12-year-old killing, that's the way of asserting power, right? And some control. And she tells when she's speaking to the boy is like, "Nan eno madilla, na mama odakudru. I didn't do anything and she was hitting me." That powerlessness. Remember learned helplessness? That horse one? Learned helplessness, and now the child wants to feel that, hey, I'm powerful. Survival instincts. And how do I know to assert, the power? By wanting. See, for that example, in many schools that I have spoken, bullying, the number of times people have given that KGF example. Have you seen Rocky Boy, how the world treated him bad and then he became a, Rocky boy that he is, and then all power came to him and violence was justified. And isn't that appealing with that background music and that and this? Being a bully is now made desirable. So therefore, here what we are telling is children or any witness for that matter can develop two kinds of. So when I say kinds, then types, look at it dimensionally. Internalizing problem. Internalizing problem means their problems are more inwards. So I don't know, I'm just seeing the Nimhans, the tag here. It just made me remember my professor. Is she still there? Nitya Purnima? Dr. Nitya Purnima? Okay. So Dr. Nitya Purnima was my, trainer in my MSc, and then she was also my colleague. She would tell about one particular case. This is 12 years. Memory, chronology, numbers could be, but she would talk about how this one child developed conversion disorder. This child is a witness to domestic violence. Every time screaming and begging parents, don't fight, don't fight, don't fight. But at one point in time, she loses the ability to speak. See, it's as if, what's the use of my voice? This child, look at that. This child couldn't. For all you know, it could be selective mutism. Selective mutism is an unconscious decision that I won't speak. Or conversion disorder is, see, it's like, imagine, voice is there to get certain things done. And now the child is realizing that there is no use of my voice. So therefore, it's not an unconscious decision or conscious nothing. Simply losing the ability to speak. It's an internalizing problem. I had read this case of a rape victim. Listen to this, how body sometimes take decisions involuntarily beyond our control. Gang raped by her own set of friends. They had gone on a trip and, gang raped. She got up, she not got up. When I say she got up, she was unconscious and she gained, the consciousness. And then she couldn't walk. Conversion disorder would talk about how it's like, why are the limbs there? To run away from danger. Having two legs to run away and but not being able to run away. Now the body is taking a decision that hey, this is good for nothing. May it become redundant. She couldn't. Biologically, there is no reason. But then psychologically, look how the physical distress got converted into psychological illness. These are internalizing problems, no? Or a child becoming dull, depression, anxiety, all of this is internalizing. But there could also be children who develop externalizing problems, like what ma'am said. Look at this child. Tit for tat, you tell me, I'll do the opposite. I mean, further exploration might even indicate conduct disorder symptoms. Conduct disorders is, sometimes they say conduct disorder and antisocial personality correlation is high. So externalizing is mimicking the behavior of the perpetrator or substance abuse or turning to be extremely aggressive. All of these are externalizing. So now imagine if a mother is a survivor of domestic violence and is experiencing her own mental health concerns. Now there is a child who in every possible way might develop an internalizing or an externalizing set of problems. So therefore, I think in every dialogue and with every case of domestic violence, there is a need to look at it from the mental health angle. Dealing with trauma, some people have this idea of dealing with trauma. What is this picture? Don't talk about it, it will get erased by itself. With child sexual abuse, I've seen it more and more. ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರೇನೆ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮರ್ತ್ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಬಿಡಿ. Will that happen? No. Yeah, majority do that in the community, families. But this is not going to happen. In the four metaphors of dealing with trauma, the fourth one is the best. I'll come to that. But the first one is this, and this is not okay. Okay? The second approach to trauma is this. What's that? Ella helbidbeku. Everything that's troubled you, you should tell. Makes excellent case histories, but at what cost? Re-traumatizing. Yeah? The next one.
We don't even feel that we
Yeah.
have the strength to ask or to even say, but we need it
We
to
need
file an FIR. She
Correct.
has to relive. We have to
Correct.
ask her questions, which will get the information of time, when it happened, all that, and there is necessarily a re-traumatizing that's taken.
Multi-sectorial dialogue, multidisciplinary approach, not keeping it. For example, I'll tell you with certainty, my entire MSc training, abuse, violence was not part of the syllabus. Abuse, trauma was not part of the syllabus in 2010. Trauma. I mean, I now wonder what did we learn without trauma, abuse, and so all that I'm saying is it's that arc of history, no? Slowly we are getting, but then more. If psychologists were not talking about trauma and abuse, then imagine who were. And I remember, I left academics and then I started Mukta exactly for this. And Donna, cases would come to us and we would do whatever we thought was right, and we were not trauma informed. And I want you to know, not all psychologists are trauma informed because it's not part of the syllabus. And now organizations, individuals are trying to push it into the syllabus. So, and now to get judges, we need to get police, and we need to do that. For instance, earlier we have done training with police officers. When we would talk to them about, how gently to talk, they would talk about how traumatized they are from their superiors. So it's true, they are traumatized. So it's the trauma informed care. Imagine parents must be trained on trauma informed care, no? I'll tell you sometimes, my mother, she had this one line with me as a child, nothing against. So I was a very cranky eater, I wouldn't. And I'll say, Mommy, I'm feeling like puking. She'll say, Tinno ilandra marda tinistini. Oh my God, even to this day, when I see this picture, I have those trauma as a child. Trauma informed parenting, right? So it's like everybody, maybe this should be like a ABCD thing. But the whole idea is not to, you remember that learned helplessness? May we as a group not have the learned helplessness mindset. Yes, problems are aplenty. Something needs to be done on a daily moment to moment basis, and maybe see, otherwise it's so overwhelming. No, it's so overwhelming, all the things that needs to be done one step at a time. We all live one day at a time. What can we do? We must do in our individual capacities. Catch hold of that husband, catch hold of that wife, mother, the easy, when I say easiest, not in a hierarchical sense, but children. It's not that as a parent I'll catch hold of them, but one of the ways I think parenting, I don't know if there is a way that we can empower parents before they become, the parents. I think that's one of the mass level, engagements we can. But where do we regulate? Because it then becomes what's personal choices and all that. But I think each one we need to keep doing something. So a trauma-informed government. Just imagine. See, I'll tell you, those of you coming from mental health background, the father of counseling psychology, it's Carl Rogers. The last years of his life, he worked with politicians. That was his aim, humanistic approach to politics. Nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Knowing the world as it is, he didn't win, the impact was less. But look at the application that people thought of. See, I always think, trauma-informed politics, trauma-informed journalism. We have developed a module. The module is there, participants are not there. Imagine trauma-informed journalism, trauma-informed politics, trauma-informed governance. At least as a phrase we need to keep talking, and 10 years somebody somewhere, pick up. Don't know if you can. I mean, I'm just putting it across. Journalists, because that's one of the mass media. If we could organize trauma-informed course for journalists, don't know who will come, but one or two, we can. So something on those lines. See, this is the third approach. Tell me exactly what happened like a movie. This approach is not going to work. What works is this approach. Memories are all jumbled. There is no evidence to say that the first one you should pick and then you should fold it and keep it neatly. Whatever the person is comfortable with. It's okay for a while for the room to be messy. If the person says, this one I will take today, I want to process, then that's all that's needed. Are you all okay with this? All that, the summary is, when we are working with survivors of trauma, their needs matter, their timeline matters more than anything else. First, we need to realize there is a widespread impact of trauma. Like today, when I saw that picture, I had memories of my mom telling that line, vomit, I'll make you eat that. That's trauma. That's definite. Like that, so many examples each one of us are carrying, no? So first R is realize trauma is real. It's not an exaggerated idea. The next one, we need to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma. Do you all remember the signs and symptoms of trauma? Yes? No? Volume? Do you all remember? Intrusive thoughts, avoidance, all of that we need to recognize. Then we need to respond by fully integrating knowledge. I'll give you one example. I know it's getting recorded. I don't know. That's fine. This one of the someone who was admitted at Victoria years ago, I think, in my interview. Just see how things play out in the mind, and to say how maybe somewhere here there was a problem in the hospital. Just an example. This lady, so the question was anything that you want to share about your memories from the hospital, whatever you're comfortable with. She says, ಒಂದನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಮೇಡಮ್, ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಇದನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ದಿರಾ ನನ್ನ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲೇ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಐ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಕೆಪ್ಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಟೂ ಲಾಂಗ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಟೆಲ್ ಯು. This lady, I don't know the medical, you help me, Satya, ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, I think skin grafting, ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ they remove it and all that. Okay, so now it's her turn next. This lady, it's her turn next. But her turn next agide, but one other patient is already inside. While that lady is still on the table, she has had the opportunity to look at what's happening. And what she's seen has re-traumatized her. So you can imagine. So that means, the doors and there is no watchman, or I don't know how it works. She tells, Ma'am, I saw this ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತು ಗೊತ್ತಾ, ನಾನು ಅದು ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟೆ. And then it seems she went back and then she just slept. ತುಟುಕ್ ಪಿಟುಕ್ ಅನ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನು, because is that a system which is trauma informed? Why is there an anesthesia? So that we don't know what's happening. And here she saw somebody else. That is one example. So you see how the system is not trauma informed. It didn't respond properly and then she got re-traumatized. The same person tells me the lady who was there, I don't know, some procedure, she says ತೊಡೆ ಹತ್ರ ಏನೋ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರು, she was screaming and screaming, ಇನ್ಯಾರೋ screaming and screaming ಕಿರ್ಚ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಲು ಮೇಡಮ್. ಮಾರನೇ ದಿನ ಸಾಯಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. she's telling ಮಾರನೇ ದಿನ, see, and I'm telling, I understand what you're thinking, but that might not have happened. And she's telling, illa madam, kirchadadre. See, that's the memory. Years ago, kirchadre. And she tells, that day onwards, I breathe, usradakku sound nan madilla. For all you know, the other lady passed away, definitely because of certain medical. But what is the fellow patient's perspective? She screamed a lot, therefore she was out of the picture. And she said, ತುಟುಕ್ ಪಿಟುಕ್ ಅಂದಿಲ್ಲ, ಉಸಿರು ಕೂಡ ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಬಿಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ. Now you see how, can you imagine, there is pain for her, she want to scream, but then because of trauma, you remember the 4 responses to trauma? Flight, fight, freeze. She tells, I became a fawn. Doctors ಬಂದ್ರೆ ನಗ್ತೀನಿ, ನೋವಿದ್ರು ನಗ್ತೀನಿ. See, I mean, these are memories that they are having. So these are indications that you see, we're not recognizing there is trauma. We're not realizing the symptoms of it. We didn't respond. And for her to tell, ಬಡ್ಕೊಳಂಗಾದ್ರೂ ನಾನು ಕಿರ್ಚಲ್ಲ, I feel like shouting, but I won't. So that's the importance of trauma-informed care. Imagine, will this be a lady who will allow the child to cry? Bye, muchkon kutko, tutuk pituk kanbida. Now it becomes intergenerational trauma. So we need to break it. And I think I'll stop it at this particular slide. Otherwise, don't know what you'll break of mine. Fine, then any questions, anything? It was lovely connecting with all of you. So maybe I'll really put the thank you slide so you know it's done. Yeah, any questions? Yes.
So I work with
patients, rather the doctors are, in the project that I'm involved in, we ask the doctors and we have social workers to kind of, interact with women who come to the clinical setup as survivors of violence. But like you said, and as we know, there's no trauma informed therapy. The counselors
Yeah.
themselves are grappling with feminist counseling that we try and, kind of train them in. Given that circumstance, is there anything that, you can recommend or suggest, or and this is a very, in-depth,
Elaborate.
long-term, hand holding that will be required. I mean,
True.
Saki centers themselves, like she mentioned,
I
are
know.
not
I know.
trauma informed.
Yeah.
But is there something that, in, like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you're saying. It's like easily something that we can
yeah,
communicate and train and not make things. I think then I always look at what Carl Rogers said as the three core conditions of counseling. No, empathy, genuineness, unconditional positive regard. I know these are easier said than most difficult, but then I feel the easiest is to build in listening skills. Let the whole 2 years of training just be listening skills, non judgmental attitude, just being genuine. I feel that's all. And I think these should not even be called counseling skills. These are the human skills. Would you? Yeah.
One is that the recent NFHS study, the report says that more than half of the women in the country still believe that they can be hit if they do not
Yeah.
cook well, they don't put salt in the food, or if they have transgressed, their husbands have the right to hit.
Look
So
at
no,
that.
that is a very difficult a thought process to kind of change. So even if we are doing awareness sessions, how do we address that?
Yeah.
My second question is that when we talk about domestic violence, I think the first thing that comes to us in our mind is spousal violence. So recently, where we had an external assessment that happened, when we were all sitting together to discuss as an organization as to in community centers, is there violence that's happening? Domestic violence was the topic, and most of them said no. We've been working with this space for the last 20 years, so there's no domestic violence, no domestic violence. And the external evaluators are very quiet. And after 5 minutes, I said, "Are you telling me that in your communities, not one child is being hit?" So when we talk about domestic violence, we're only talking about spousal violence. We are
Yes.
not talking about other
Children.
family members who are affected by violence, and includes children as well. So domestic violence could look like husband being very, very taunting to the wife, and the wife unable to manage it and beating the child up. That is also something that we can mean to look at domestic violence. So I
Absolutely,
think
ma'am.
we need to reassess what mainstream understands as
Correct.
domestic violence,
Yeah.
and maybe that way there will be a more community based intervention rather than make it more individualistic.
So true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it's not because there is lack of time, but I feel that's like such a comprehensive way to look at the issue of domestic elderly abuse. No, isn't elderly abuse part of domestic violence? So that's so we need to talk about all of it.